When you look at the early history of the ETA, this is a copy of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds novel from 1898. You know, and you look at the Buck Rogers comics from the 1930s and 40s and onward. I got a complete collection of Buck Rogers. It's awesome. Really, I got it at a used bookstore in New York City last summer. It's amazing. I love reading it. Or even things like the Shaver Mysteries. These are all things from the early 20th century. What you find is that these are kind of some of the earlier cultural formulations of dealing with non-humans and extraterrestrials and things of that particular sort. When you look at the early 20th century worldview, a couple of things that come to my mind. It was what we might call a materialistic worldview, in the sense that, you know, science was absolutely in the ascendant. Progress was one of the catchwords. People were building bigger and better machines. Religion was among the intellectual group, really getting pushed to the side, as it would for much of the remainder of the 20th century. You didn't really find a lot of top-level academicians and scientists talking about consciousness at that point. They're talking about it now, but not at this time. And then the other early thing about the early 20th century is that the sky was the great frontier. We started flying, right? And beyond flight, I think in the human imagination, the next frontier after that naturally would be space. So this is, I think, how we're thinking. I think, and you could say that we were predisposed to think about beings from outer space. You know, we're just getting our wings literally and figuratively, and then looking beyond to see, well, who's out there? You know, in H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds, it's beings from Mars who come, and you know, and so on. And then in the middle of the 20th century, or 1940s, we have the flying saucer phenomenon. So it's in that context that this whole phenomenon appears to us. So it really isn't surprising that some of the earliest ideas absolutely overtly entertained a kind of almost like a Buck Rogers version of the extraterrestrial hypothesis. That is, spaceships have come here. This is a copy of Donald Kehoe's. Does this have yeah, this is the pointer. This is from 1950, the first major, well, actually the second book on the flying saucer subject published. And it was a big bestseller. I mean, just look at that cover, right? It's very Buck Rogers, like the flying saucers are real. And the early ideas in the popular consciousness, if someone believed in flying saucers, that these might be space men or spacemen and space women, or space beings of some sort who had just arrived and were maybe they were surveilling the Earth in advance of something else. This was a very widespread idea in the 1950s. You get early varieties of the extraterrestrial hypothesis over the first decade or two of this phenomenon. So I call the Buck Rogers variant basically what I was just talking about. Down at the bottom here we have the Space Brother variant. It's, you know, benevolent entities, whether they're human looking, this is like out of the George Adamski scenario, or non-human entities who are here to help mankind. Hey, maybe it's true. In fact, there's reason to think, not that they're benevolent, but that they might be here to, you know, in a concern for our nuclear energy. One hears this frequently enough. But this is an early version of the ETH. And then the ancient astronaut variant. So Eric von Daniken's following me in this lecture, and he's, you know, probably the most famous proponent of that idea. But there are other writers as well, even in the 50s and 60s, who started looking at the possibility that these beings have been here long in our past. So all of these are early versions of the extraterrestrial hypothesis.